So I guess the reason why I wanted to get you on is because a lot of people are home with their dogs at the moment, which is great. And they're using their time to train their dogs and access information about issues that they might be having with their dogs. So I thought it's a perfect opportunity to get an expert on to answer some of those common questions. So if maybe you want to start with, who you are, what you do, and then I'll ask some questions that myself and some of our followers have sent in that they really want to find the answers to.
Yeah, sounds perfect. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about Bondi Behaviourist, what you do.
Well, we are a little group of dog trainers that work across Sydney. We've got 7 in the team now. We do everything from puppy schools, where we obviously get people together in group classes, to one-on-one consultations where we go out to the home or meet you out in public and train the dog in the park. We really just try and educate the owner on dog mental health is the main thing. We're finding what we've learned over the years is that dog health and dog unwanted problem behaviors are driven by the mental health, and everybody seems to put a lot of emphasis on tiring a dog out, exercising it heaps, and really we just go, if you make your dog feel safe, settled and comfortable, you won't have half of the issues you're going at. So yeah, we're just trying to educate as many people as possible.
Yeah, excellent. So tell me then, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see when people are trying to train their dog?
Oh, there's heaps. We're a nation of dog lovers, but unfortunately don't seem to be that well informed. So I think when it comes to training, people think that it's something you do once, and then the dog needs to have just learned it and is never allowed to waver from that behavior. Dogs are always learning. And we consider, we're a positive reinforcement-based company, and we use motivational tactics to create the behaviors we want and train the behaviors we want, rather than correction, where we don't really put any emphasis on correcting unwanted behaviors. We put more emphasis on training the ones we want to see. And when we're using food rewards or motivators for our dogs, people tend to use them at the beginning, but then phase them out. And then they wonder why the dogs stop working for them. Well, my answer is you stop paying them. So why would they do it anymore?
I don't want to work for free. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And people have this kind of mindset that, oh yeah, he should know that now. He should be able to do it. And of course the dog's going, you're crap. I'm going over here. You've stopped paying me a month ago, mate.
I'm guilty. I get that look from time to time.
Yeah. But unfortunately, with the outdated information, we assume they're being stubborn. When in honesty, it's us. Yeah, we're the ones that actually get caught in this battle of wills with the dog that they don't even know they're in. So.
Right. Yeah. Molly does that because she knows her commands and things like that. And she'll be looking at me as if to say, I'm not doing that unless I get a treat.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And exactly that. And there's nothing, people think it's cheating. People think it's actually cheating and wrong to try and motivate your dog. I don't understand that. Why? Just pay them, man. Like, pay your dog.
Good one. Okay. What's another common mistake? Because I was doing that. So I'm sure there's other little ones that other people have been doing.
I think we've touched on it already. They try to resolve unwanted behaviors with exercise. And to be honest, like in the city where most people are having these dogs and living with these dogs, their dogs are normally, when we get there, exhausted, absolutely run into the ground because everybody's tried exercising their dog more. They forget that it's coming from the brain. And it's normally coming from a position of stress, fear, anxiety, or hyperarousal. And exercise normally adds to them. If we go really hard, if we go to the point where, geez, it won't tire out, I'm going to add more, you end up with a dog that's running on adrenal fatigue. And then we've got a brain that just doesn't work well. So often when we get there, we're actually asking people to go take a step back, let the dog recover because it's been run into the ground. And it will come into a frame of mind where it's receptive to new information, where it's not reflexive, it's actually having some deliberation in its thought process, and it can communicate. Because if it's up there all the time, well, it's like a human. It's pretty broken.
Yeah, right, right. So is that more for a dog that's super energetic? People are then exercising it more to get that energy out, but it's looking for more mental stimulation. Is that what you're saying?
That's right, yeah. You know, a lot of people, they will see a really energetic dog, as you've described it, and they will normally link that with high adrenaline activities, which compounds the learned association of hyperarousal. So if you take the dog into the park that's already up there and start pinging a ball around, it's going to cement that learned association in. So he's actually going to get harder and more hyper in those environments. If you see him and like, hey, buddy, hey, how you doing? Hey, let's go. Of course, he's going to learn associations of high arousal around people. So we end up compounding our problem. So rather than, for me, it's not about taking them up there. It's about training what you actually want to achieve. And so when I present myself to a dog that's hyper, I'm like, hi mate, how you doing? Can you sit please? And I'll reward the dog for sitting and completing wanted behaviors. I'll take him to the dog park and ask him to stay, because stay is so much harder than moving for that dog. And I'll drain a lot more energy by challenging him.
Yeah.
The way I see it is I think of it like I'm taking him to school. But if we take him to school and ask him to run around the playground, like throwing a ball around the park, he ain't going to get very good at maths. You know, he's going to be an idiot that runs around the playground. So I really genuinely ask for what I want to see and then reward what I want to see when he offers it.
Yeah, right. Okay, good one. And I guess coming into that, you know, there's a lot of old ways of thinking out there, and myths of how we should train our dog. So what are some of the old ways of thinking that you can share with us that we shouldn't be doing so that we can interact with our dog more effectively?
My big one is there's a couple of big ones out there. The old myth is dominance theory, where people are still under the assumption that dogs are trying to dominate or submit to one another.
Yeah.
They don't have that ability. That's a very outdated study that was done in 1970s and disproven in 2001 by the people that did the study. It just got popularized by TV, like famous dog trainers, not saying names.
Yeah.
But that's because that method of training makes very good TV.
Right.
Our method of training is about setting them up for win. We don't see the reactions. We actually take them in under threshold and gradually desensitize. And it makes for shit TV. It's really boring. Here's a dog doing really well, not doing any problems. And the other big myth, misconception out there is assuming that dogs are moral. They don't know right from wrong. They know good and bad in terms of consequences to them.
Yeah.
But they're not actually trying to influence anyone else's emotions, only their own.
Example of that.
So they're not trying to please you. They're not actually, or they're not spiteful. They're not vindictive, and they're not stubborn, as we said.
Yeah, right.
They've got the cognitive ability of an 18-month-old child.
Okay.
And it's basically a dog acting on its previous learned consequences. If it finds it rewarding, it will do it again. If it finds it discouraging, it's likely to not do it. But of course, it's always doing a risk assessment. It will maybe tolerate something to achieve that reward. But it's not about trying to influence you or another dog's emotions.
So essentially, they're just trying to get the reward that they want.
The summary of it is they are self-serving.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Yeah.
So the puppy dog eyes isn't necessarily trying to make me feel guilty for something or wanting.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Okay. So
let's look at like consequences. So he may have learned that when I do these eyes, you look down at him and you start interacting with him. Of course, he finds that rewarding.
Right.
It's really that simple.
So an example of that, say, like at the moment, I'm home all the time with Molly, and when she hears the keys, she looks up and she gives me this look as if to say, are you going to leave me here? And I get really guilty. So that's not her feeling guilty. Is that more her getting anxious as to, am I about to be left home by myself, or how do I treat that?
what you've got is, and I'll be a little bit technical, but try not to overwhelm people. You've got a stimulus, which is your keys,
Yeah.
and which normally introduces some sort of change in the environment for the dog. So when we pick up our keys, there's actually quite a few variables of what that might be. So it could be we're just moving our keys. It could be that I'm going out without the dog. It could be I'm going out the dog, but it's a normal routine, or it might be an evening, for example, so it's different. It could be that the dog is coming with me. So because it's not set in stone what's going to happen next, what you are seeing is information seeking. The dog's heard the stimulus, and from that moment forward is information seeking until it gets enough information to then understand what's going to happen next. So in a way, it is going, what's going on? Like that's all it wants. But we tend to read into it way more than there should be. So if you cut it down to what it really is, you're just seeing a dog that is maybe feeling trepidation about the uncertainty of the information, but ultimately it just wants an answer.
Okay. Oh, good one. Okay. So I guess with that said, you know, we're all at home at the moment and the dogs are loving it. I think most are anyway, but we're going to have to go back to work soon. So what's going to happen with our dog's behavior, having gone from being with us pretty much 24/7 to now all of a sudden they're back to, I guess, their old routine, which they've probably forgotten was their old routine, and they're going to be left alone a lot more. What sort of changes are we going to start to see in our dogs?
It's going to be stressful for them, whether we like it or not. And it's really, as we get closer and closer to that line where we do go back to work, we really need to start putting in the groundwork now, because it's going to end up with a lot of people and a lot of problems. And the dogs will be obviously in trouble as well, but the dogs aren't the ones that make the phone calls to me. So I really want people to get on top of this now. We can do some really simple stuff, start to create healthy degrees of separation is the main one. If you're around your dog 24/7 at the moment, you need to start developing its tolerance of being on its own. And that's not easy. It's not a case of just pushing them away, because that will cause more stress. They won't understand that. So my advice around it is really simply use your resources that you've got available to you. So food is the big one. When you're feeding your dog, put a barrier, whether it be, there's a million ways to create a barrier, whether that's a crate, a baby gate, a door. It's essentially the same thing as a barrier, and build your tolerance up of that. That's the first step. Just don't let that dog freak out when the barrier is put between you and the dog. So give it a reason to want to be there. Don't flood it. Don't leave it there so long that it panics, because that will compound the negative association of that space. And in general, encourage lots of sleep and rest. We touched on it a little bit earlier when we said about high arousal. What we're seeing after 2 months of everybody being home is dogs are losing their mind because they've been kept awake now for 2 months solid with people being home. And most people aren't.
All day. Is that fair enough? They're used to sleeping all day, and so now that they're constantly go, and are they feeling stressed or just tired?
Both. They go hand in hand, those two. Dogs need 18 hours a day. A healthy dog will sleep 18 hours a day. And when we're around them, we're stimulants, whether we like it or not. Little things like getting up and getting a glass of water will just keep them, rather than being in a deep sleep, to being in that kind of half vigilant sleep, which you won't see the effects for a couple of months. But after a couple of months, you will start to see almost like a personality shift. They'll go from being, things that they could tolerate a lot of before, to just generally being a little bit more ratty, start barking, start getting agitated by external triggers a little bit more easily. And that's because their tolerance of change is decreasing as they get more tired and stressed.
Yeah, right. So what should we be doing? So if we know that we're going to be, out of the house now from, 9 to 5 or what have you, should we start now just going for little trips outside by ourselves and little chores and leaving the dog home and extend that time away for them gradually over a week to get them used to, say, for example, we go back to work next week, for example, we use this week to get out more. And if that's the case, are we then rewarding them? And I know a lot of people like myself are guilty, right? I know I've got to leave. I'm going to give her a nice, juicy, some sort of treat now, run out the door so she's distracted by that juicy treat. And then she won't be so, anxious that I've left because she's like, but I got a cool treat. Is that the wrong way going about it?
No, but you can fine tune it.
Okay.
Whenever you leave your dog alone, you do want to create a positive association of you leaving.
Mhm.
We don't advise people blindside their dog.
Yep.
Uh, we don't want them to go, hey, look over there, and then go out the door. Like, that would freak anyone out.
Yeah, right.
But we can go, hey, mate, on your bed, good, sit, reward, stay, and just leave calmly without causing any sort of angst. A really good tip as well, I've been trying to give out for a long time now, is the treat that you give your dog at time of leaving, generalize it. Don't just bring it out when you're leaving because you'll poison it.
You're right.
I made the mistake recently where, I was like, oh, kangaroo jerky is my dog's favorite. So I'll give it to him when he leaves. He actually won't even touch it now when we're home because it's been so tainted by the association of us leaving. So we say, like, at mealtime, give them a Kong and let them practice that Kong a couple of times a day. That time when you're leaving, use the same Kong because, one, the dog knows it's achievable. He's practiced it. He's got a learned association that it's really, really fun. Yeah. And sure, you leave, but I'm getting my Kong. Yeah. It's really good. Yeah. Or whatever food. Yeah.
So mix it up a little bit so they're not associating that one thing with that negative behavior of your leaving. Is that fair to say?
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. What other things can we do, I guess, to make that transition easier, whether it be when we're gone, are we giving them interactive toys to play with, or what can we do just to reduce that stress that they're inevitably about to go through?
So a couple of things. Like, you can make sure that the space that you leave them in is a calm space and doesn't have access to potential stressors. And the really obvious ones I can think of are the front window where people are passing by the house. So if the dog can see people passing by all the time, then the dog's going to be sitting there in a sense of anticipation and potentially angst. Whereas if it just doesn't have access to that, it's more likely to relax and drop its guard. And again, like similar with the treats that we talked about leaving, make sure that the dog's got a learned association of rest and sleep. Because if you only ever put your dog in the laundry, when you go out, you can guarantee it's a prison cell. It's not a bedroom. And the other thing, when it comes to the enrichment you give, you want to make sure that you give them things that entertain them, but don't spike their adrenaline. You don't want to leave out that ball that they push under the counter because that's going to cause frustration that they can't retrieve it. You don't want to leave out things that they just manically destroy, because what we're actually aiming for the dog to do is pacify itself with these items, not just distract. There's a massive difference. The dog that can actually go to something, say, for example, something it chews or, suckles on or just relaxes with, like laying on, they're going to allow the dog to decompress and come down, which allows it to then think and go, oh, it's not actually that bad. Whereas if you leave something that is high adrenaline and high arousal, the dog will go into it and sure, it'll be distracted for that duration, but it will come out in exactly the same, if not a worse frame of mind at the end of it.
Okay. So I guess one last question is, I'm seeing a lot more of things like, I think it's called Furbo and different interactive sort of devices where it's like a camera and you can say hello to your dog and check in with your dog and, release a treat and that sort of thing. Is it a good thing or a bad thing once we are away at work to be checking in with our dog? Is it best just to let them be in their environment and not re-stimulate them? Or is it good for them to be able to hear our voice or see us? What are your thoughts on those sort of devices?
Honestly, not. Look, they can potentially serve a really good purpose. In the sense that if your dog is really struggling, knowing when to step in can definitely help them. There's no doubt about that. My problem is that most people don't really know how to use them properly, and they're more using it for themselves than the dog.
Mm-hmm.
They'll maybe be calling the dog out in the middle of a sleep, and that is the worst thing you can do.
Yeah, right.
You want your dog to relax. People, unfortunately, will look at the furbo, see their dog sleeping and go, oh my God, he's bored. And your dog's not bored, he's bloody sleeping. Like, dogs love sleep. So, and they'll wake him up.
Yeah. So is it more just using it when they can see that they're anxious or they're in a bad state?
Yeah, that would be when I would do it. And also the way you communicate through it has got to be really, I guess, deliberate. You've got to be mindful of your tone and your voice, what effect that has on the dog. Because if you go in with a really high-pitched, high-energy voice, your dog's going to get quite anxious, because going back to that information, it's going to want to know what the bloody hell's happening. And then it's going to not have the answers, which is going to cause more angst, and we'll end up putting it in a loop. Whereas when we're communicating with them, if we're nice and clear and go, hey mate, sit down, good boy, go on your bed, nice and clear direction, and as long as the dog understands it, it's fantastic. It can actually give the dog clarity in a moment of uncertainty.
Right.
The thing is, at the end of the day, when a dog gets stressed, they do comfort behaviors, and normally that involves some sort of chewing or some sort of destruction behavior. So you want to make sure that your dog doesn't have access to stressors, so it doesn't have to go into a comfort behavior. Yeah. And if it does, it's got appropriate enrichment that allows it to decompress and come down.
Right. So is it more giving them a command, or because they're seeking information in that time when they are stressed, telling them something that they do know, whether it be, okay, just calmly telling them to go sit on their bed. And once they've been told, they know what's expected of them and they'll do it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. Like us, in a moment where you're not sure, give them clarity.
Yeah.
It just makes them feel better. Essentially, the dog feels like it's losing control.
Yeah.
And if you give them an element of something, a task they can do that is achievable and rewarding, then they're going to feel better. Yeah. Unfortunately, what we do is go, what's the matter? What are you doing? What do you want? They're all questions to an already freaked out dog. They don't help it because it doesn't know the answer.
Yeah, so. Makes sense. So just be really clear and calm, and then that will help with the dog, obviously. Yeah. Great. Cool. Thank you so much. I think I've learned some things and was doing some things wrong. So it was so good to get that clarity. I'll be making sure that I don't blindside my dog and do a run-in with a tree. But I think that was really good. A lot of people I think are out there, like myself, are finding better ways of doing things, but also are struggling with what's myth, what's an old way of thinking, and just, navigating that terrain of what we should be doing. So thank you so much. I do appreciate that. And hopefully everyone got a lot out of that. But we'll be touching base with you again in another week or so and going through some more questions. But is there anything else that you want to let people know at the moment that you're getting a lot of that you think will help?
The main thing at the moment, the priority is definitely what we talked about today, is building up those tolerances of being independent and being without you, so that we can limit the damage when we do go back to work. Inevitably, there will be some, but you can start putting in the groundwork now so that it makes it easier on everyone.